Testing 1 2. Can you hear me in the back? All right.
Can both mics be on at the same time? Check.
I just don't capture in.
Hello, as people are coming in, please don't forget to grab dinner. You'll be some folks from the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority to greet you. Grab dinner, grab a drink. I mean, they're drinks, they're not drinks. A brisk tea, I will take one. Girl, that's what I was just thinking. Oh, it's like in here. Thank you for being here. Come on in. I like this mic. Grab yourself some dinner. We have chicken sandwiches, shrimp and grits, shrimp po' boys, and chicken salads, and drinks, and banana pudding. Anna, will you share? And Tremaine, do you have Facebook? Do you have Facebook? Tremaine, Terry, do you have it? Okay. Yes, thank you guys for come on in. We're gonna get started shortly. The live is already up. I'm in the chat. They'll begin casting shortly. Please share to your socials. Oh, and you can hear me talking in the mic. It's about a 20-second lag. It's uh, it's actually a it's actually a HU stream. Yep. Yep. I was gonna keep this over here and then walk around the audience and do it that way if that works. Thank you for the 2 people that are here in the chat already. Welcome. We'll get started shortly. Thank you so much for joining. Hello and welcome to today's Internet for All session, connecting the Commonwealth's community conversation here at the Harrisburg University. This session is co-hosted by the Young Professionals of Color, Greater Harrisburg, and the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Harrisburg University. Shout out to Madonna Wochi and Jamal Jones. We're so excited to be here with you guys today. My name is Kamika Campbell. I am the YPOC part of this group, and we actually have some members in the room, so thank you all for coming. We just wanted to let you know a couple of housekeeping items. Dinner is here for you if you haven't already gotten dinner. We do have a couple more dinner boxes over here. We have several choices with some drinks. Restrooms are in the down the hall, so if you need to get to the restroom, as folks are coming, we'll give you a few minutes. Please go ahead and grab dinner over here to the right, where I am walking. We have, just for the folks in the room, sorry if you are online, there's not dinner online, but we can tell you about it when we see you in person. It's chicken salad, there's shrimp po' boys, shrimp and grits, and chicken sandwiches, and then some drinks. Also, a shout out to Flavor 76 for catering this evening. If you are interested in learning more about Young Professionals of Color Greater Harrisburg, please visit our website at ypoc.org. If you're interested in learning more about CIE, visit Harrisburg University's website, cie.harrisburguniversity.edu. And we thank our community partners for bringing this together. And I just want to take a short moment. I know you're all busy eating, but please give yourselves a round of applause for coming in person today to this important conversation. I'm so glad that you guys are here and here early. And I'm going to turn it over to our presenters for the evening. We have with us in the building from the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority. We have, go ahead and tell me your names again because I forgot already.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Snyder. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Manager with the Authority.
Hi, my name is Jesse Suiters. I am the Infrastructure Program Manager for the Authority.
That's it from our office.
And also I'd like to turn it over to our presenters from A to Z Diversity, Mr. Tremaine Terry and Ms. Anna White.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. So, Tremaine Terry, I'm with A to Z Diversity Solutions. I'm sure most of you know Ms. Anna White. We serve as sub-consultants to Michael Baker International for the BEAD 5-year action plan and the digital equity plan for the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority. So back in 2021, the Biden administration passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is roughly almost $2 trillion designated to go into infrastructure improvements throughout the country, right? That's everything from roads and bridges to airports to ports to your utilities like your water, your sewer, your gas. But then also a big part of that is internet, right? So when COVID-19 hit, we realized the gap between internet availability and connection and what we needed. Back in March of 2020, the world basically stopped. Everyone went home, and that's when like the haves and have-nots really came to life. Schools, we had kids that were trying to connect so that they could take classes in school, and if they didn't have reliable internet, that was a challenge. Folks were trying to schedule doctor appointments. We switched to telehealth, and if you didn't have reliable internet, that was a challenge. Work, we all started working from home. And again, if you didn't have that reliable internet, all of that became a challenge. So all of that was highlighted in COVID-19, during COVID-19. So the investment in internet availability and accessibility became one of the key priorities under the new administration. So the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, like all other states, as part of the IIJA, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, was tasked with creating plans to expand internet, and then also, once it's expanded, what to do with it, right? So there's two programs that we're going to talk about here today. The first one is BEAD, as it's referred to, which is the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program. And then the other one is Digital Equity, which is after the build-out. BEAD is about the build-out, the construction of the infrastructure, and then Digital Equity is what do we do with it? And a lot of it's geared towards the underserved and unserved populations, and you're going to hear a lot about that later on or throughout the course of the presentation. So in Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we're going to be receiving roughly $1.2 billion for BEAD. That's the build out of the infrastructure in the underserved and unserved communities. And we're working on the digital equity plan, and I think that the amounts allocated to Pennsylvania is going to be announced later this year as to what Pennsylvania is going to be receiving for digital equity. So we've been hosting a lot of these community conversations as well as roundtables throughout the state. I think we're over 20 community conversations similar to this one in many rural communities and many of our urban communities, just to get feedback, just to hear from you, to learn about your pains, your struggles as it relates to internet, and then how that can inform the BEAD and digital equity plans. We've had a host of roundtables where we're talking to certain industry groups like the internet service providers or the workforce development groups out there to just talk about the best way we can roll these plans out and make sure that all Pennsylvanians are included in every aspect of the rollout. It's been interesting because the feedback that we've been getting, no matter where we're at, right? We could be in a rural county in upstate Pennsylvania or in Philadelphia, and the pain points for all Pennsylvanians is about the same. Access to reliable internet, making sure that the internet that we have can basically manage our day-to-day activities. I mean, that's a lot of concerns, and then affordability are a lot of the concerns that we've been hearing from Pennsylvanians from corner to corner. So thank you for coming out. We're absolutely looking forward to your feedback. We want this conversation to be engaging and a safe space for you to share with us your experiences and what you expect or what you want to see as we roll out this large investment. I think in most of our lifetimes we haven't seen, and we're not going to see another investment like this. Where the government is pumping this much money into infrastructure, so it's important that the feedback that we give will inform the plan so that we can get the best investment for all Pennsylvanians. Thank you.
He doesn't like when you don't clap. I'm kidding. Thank you, Tremaine. I'm Anna White. I work alongside of Tremaine Terry with A to Z Diversity. I did want to also add that digital equity is about ensuring that everybody in our society not only has equal access to, but also knowledge around technology, right? So we know in our area, not only are we talking about the devices and having access to those things, but also how are we using it? How are we increasing educational awareness around those things? And also how do we ensure that there is proper use of that education to help close the digital divide, but also to ensure that there's safety around privacy and things for largely exploited communities. So as we're having those conversations, I know we're going to get into, broadband and internet, and I know we're going to have a lot of passionate discussion around personal and lived experiences with internet access or lack thereof, but I want you to think about it in terms of digital equity, right? The fullness of it. So it's not just about the devices. It's also about the technology. It's also about the digital skills. It's also about us increasing the need to bring that education to individuals, but I also, for the people that are doing community work, want you to think about digital access in terms of how you all are providing help in your own communities and what your audiences need and what you need in terms of software or things like that would have been some of the ways in which a lack of technology or lack of education has really stifled the work that you all are doing in the community. So I know when we get into this kind of broadband conversation, I'm like, my box doesn't work, or I need more than one, or I don't know why, I can't connect. But we want to also think like, for our future and for our generational kind of endurance and sustainability, what do you think our children will need? What do you think our older generation is missing right now? So because we will likely never see this amount of funding, we have to think about all of the possibilities that we can, so that we can have a very strong conversation about what it is that we need. So make sure we leave nothing out. So today, it's just a meeting overview. We're going to do an icebreaker. I'm going to give you some terminology. We're going to go into helping you understand speed. For a lot of people, this may be information you already know, but we are going to go over Broadband 101. Then we're going to have some questions and discussions about those specific items. We're going to talk about the survey. The survey is going to have 4 different sections. We're going to talk about access and subscriptions, internet use, affordability and satisfaction, and digital skills. So again, when you're thinking about closing the gap, that digital divide, you want to look at those different components, right? It's not just about the internet use and how slow your internet is, but do you even have access to it? Do you even have, or are you being over-delivered a dream about access speed at a high rate and a high financial point, and you're not receiving that in return? Well, for affordability and satisfaction is a big one, so we will get into that in the survey. And again, like I said, that digital skill, making sure that you understand how to log in. We know that telehealth, I think you were talking about telehealth earlier, telehealth was a gift and a curse, because yes, it was this fancy thing that came in, but people didn't understand how to use it, right? People didn't have the access to language components that helped people do telehealth in the same way. So there were still components that, while we were looking at it, still wasn't helping to address the needs of our community. And then we'll have an open discussion with PBDA representatives, and they'll be able to answer questions about funding and what's to come. All right. Speaking of internet speed. All right, yep. Too many times we reached. So we're always liking to start off with an icebreaker. So if your internet was an animal, what animal would it be and why? Kind of like I would say turtle for what just occurred right now. And sometimes it's rabbit speed, so it will go in front of us before we're even ready to go. So if anybody just wants to say, if your internet was an animal, what animal would it be and why? Just appease me, please, during the icebreaker. We'll start with Jasmine.
I think they're fast. I don't really know how fast they are, but my internet has to be high speed for like my videography and my photography, so I need something fast. So I'd compare it to like a lion or a jaguar.
Okay. So it sounds like you're comparing it based off of how strong it is and needing that level of strength in order to get your work done for your occupation. Thank you.
I would compare ours to a giraffe. It reaches all 3 floors, but its mobility as far as where you go outside of those 3 floors and where you're at, your access can be a little limited.
Wow. Okay. Now y'all don't have internet concerns or anything y'all want to say? Nothing pressing?
I would say mine was like a dog that liked to take a lot of naps and would just be really kind of unreliable. And we actually just switched from Xfinity to Verizon, and now it's like that dog lost one of its legs, and now it like is really unreliable and falls asleep a lot.
Just mourning the loss of a active dog here. Okay.
Mine would be like a dolphin. If I had to use an animal, I need the ability to be able to have it communicate at all times wherever I am with whatever type of recipients on the other side. So I think of the way dolphins can use other pathic ways of communicating for that. So strength's important, but not nearly as important as 24/7. No matter where I'm at, I gotta have it. So that's
active dolphin. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to say turtle/rabbit.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a union. Care to elaborate?
Well, it's slow at times because I travel sometimes, and the internet speed is not the friendliest. Where I am at home, sometimes it interferes with other folks that are trying to get on. I live above an actual business, so a lot of activity goes on during the course of that time. So I'd say tortoise/rabbit. hair.
Okay, I heard you say a couple things there. So it is depending on if you're traveling, the speed can be altered,
Right.
but also I heard you say that because there's a lot of different people and it's a lot of kind of compounded use in one space, that could alter how your speed is affected. So the
Right.
people around you's internet or whatever is happening, how they're pulling at it can have an effect on your overall speed.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, thank you. Oh, no.
I was going to
I'll
ask
go.
the kid how their Roblox experience was, but okay.
I'll just quickly say mine, I guess, is a bat. It's nocturnal. I use mine mostly at night. So
Okay, yes, yes. So sometimes the time when you're using the internet, so if there's downside and it's just you, yep.
I'd say mine's like a gopher. Like it kind of like pops in and out. It seems mostly strong, but we're actually trying to figure out what our issue is. My partner primarily works from home. I do both. But we're trying to like, is it the router? Is it the, and like we've poured money into it, like trying to rectify it, and still just for, seemingly no reason. And then sometimes it just comes back.
So gopher and also that game of whack-a-mole where you're whacking one thing, something else is coming back up for you. Okay.
Yes, you do.
We're streaming.
I'm insanely loud.
You think we need a mic?
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. I suppose mine is kind of like a working animal in that it's faster than I need it to be because I don't really use it for much besides email and the few things I have to. And just like with working animals, I don't feel it's right to belabor animals. So I'm gonna say it's that it could probably be faster if I needed to do anything with it, but I mostly just send emails and do Zoom meetings. And if they cut out, oh no.
I'll tell you mine. Mine is definitely like a spider's web, and I'm the spider because I have networked this internet. I have the little Google Home things. I have all these different things, and it still don't work. It still feels like the web is not webbing enough.
Not doing a thing. Do we have anything in the chat? Or we have one back there.
Got it. Here you go, sir.
So I would say my internet is probably like a rhinoceros, probably because I built the network, and it is big enough to carry everything that's on it, and when it's fast, and for me it works. So I don't know, more like a rhinoceros. It's big and fast.
Rhinoceros. And you said because you built it? Yeah. All right.
We need passwords to your deal, bro.
You can just drop one of those rhinos off at Kamika's house. She's currently in a web. All right. So we are going to talk a little bit about kind of the speed and understanding speed, but I wanted to give the broadband key definitions. So when we talk about download speeds, we're talking about usually the larger number, and it refers to the rate at which data or information can be received by a user's computer or device from the internet. Then you have the upload speed. So turn me up. All right. They don't want us to know. The upload speed is usually the smaller number and refers to the rate at which data or information is transferred from a user's computer or device to the internet. So you'll hear a lot about, oh, I want a download speed, that's this. I want an upload speed, that's this. And then the Mbps, the megabits per second. And that just refers to the upload and download speeds that are used to measure the actual file size of data transferred per second over a channel. Numbers convey the speed of a network or internet connection. I think this one might be going out. Okay, so when understanding internet speed, again, we're looking at the animal. So we have the snail. It'll be about 15 Mbps for about 1 to 2 devices. And that's gonna be good for just checking email, searching on Google, streaming music on one device. It will take a 5 gigabyte movie 1 hour to download. So as it off, I'm an adult. So when looking at the speeds at the bottom, you want to see how long it takes from 15 Mbps to 300 plus. We go from 1 hour to 2.5 minutes to download the same amount of movie, right? To download that file. So at 15 with 1 or 2 devices, it's good for just checking emails. I think Brandon was talking about the simple things, right? When we're looking at 60 Mbps, that's 3 to 5 devices. So now we're adding more devices, but also we're adding more. And it's good for streaming video on one device. You can video call with Skype or FaceTime, and then you can get some online gaming happening. You have about 12 and a half minutes to download something. So you can already see that once you double, a little bit more than double, it'll go from 1 hour of downloading something to about 12 and a half minutes. So this can make a significant difference if you're adding more than one device, or if you're even looking at the rate in which it's going to take you to download the same thing across these different devices. And when we move up to 150, that's usually around 3 to 5 devices. And that's going to be a good amount of speed for streaming HD video on a few devices. If you have a lot of kiddos, there's multiplayer online gaming. And if you want to be upstairs while they're playing their stuff and you want to download your large files for work, that's usually the amount. And it takes about 4.5 minutes to download that 5 gigabyte movie. And then 300 plus can take about 3 to 5 devices, and that's good for heavy internet use and downloads. So if you have a lot going on, a lot of gamers, a lot of people doing work, it allows for HD streaming on multiple devices without interruption and HD multiplayer gaming. A lot of times when people are choosing internet speed, they ask you a lot of questions like, well, how many people are in the house? Do you have kids? Do they like the internet, or what's going on at your house, right? And you're like, well, why are you asking me that? That's weird. But it's because they're trying to really understand and correct or kind of fix an algorithm for you to how you look at what speed you need for things to be done correctly. So if you go in there and you're like, oh, I just want the lowest amount because that's the cheapest, it's going to take you an hour to do something, right? Versus, okay, I'm going to get 300 plus. The price point's a little different, but it's going to take me 2.5 minutes. How many of you guys usually understand internet speed or pick your internet speed based off of price? Or used to? How many go in there and you're like, I want this amount and I want this amount? Yeah. You go based off of speed. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. And the mic is just so we're streaming, so they can hear you.
Oh, yeah. So for me, because I usually have people in the house, and sometimes I have an office in there where I work or I may stream, and the other family's doing other things, I have to be able to have enough. I can't, there's no acceptance for, oops, somehow everything's out. Or while I was uploading, it's not working. So the solution I found for it came from having a higher speed, regardless of the price. And lastly, no matter what you pay for, you're not always going to get that. So even though you're paying for 1,000, you double check and sneak up on them. You're only getting 400 at a time until you complain, and then they speed it back up again. So that's my experience: is ask for the highest amount. In the worst case scenario, you're still going to be okay.
Yep. So when you went in fully aware to say, no matter the price point, I need this speed. For a lot of families, people can come in and be like, listen, I have $80. How fast is my internet going to run off of 80? Because I only have 80 to give you this month, right? So a lot of people don't understand the difference between that low amount and that higher amount. So we just wanted to start by helping you all understand kind of what that looks like. So we talked a little bit about unserved and underserved, and we want to make sure that we distinguish between the two because there's a lot of us who do not have access at all. If you do not have access at all, you're a location with no access to wired internet service at the speeds that meet the FCC threshold of 25 Mbps download and 3 Mbps upload. That is the minimum. So if you do not have access to wired internet service, you are considered unserved. So when people say, oh, I don't have the internet, it's like, do you just not have it completely, or do you have it, but you feel like you don't, feel like you just should never have it? There are some people who do have internet services and they are underserved. So those locations are where the internet services meet or exceed the FCC threshold, but without access to speeds of 100 Mbps download and 20 Mbps upload. So there's unserved communities and there's underserved communities. And this funding is really looking at the infrastructure to be able to build so that people with no access in rural areas or other areas have access, And then if you do have access, how do we enhance that experience so that you're getting good, valuable internet access? Broadband 101 delivery methods. So we see at the bottom, we have the slower, kind of antiquated ways, right? So we have satellite, the fixed antenna, and you see the more you go up, then your speeds get quicker. So you go from 3G wireless to 4G to 5G, and 5G is the latest wireless technology that comes from both 5G small cell antennas and large towers. So there's usually a lot of controversy about those towers, but when you start to build out those 5G, it usually comes with those 5G towers. And we see that at the bottom, you go from satellite, which is data that comes from a satellite, and then you go into fixed antennas. A lot of us can remember those, right? So the data that comes across radio waves using broadcast towers, the very high-speed DSL, which is data that comes over telephone lines. So if you're still plugging in and using DSL, we have the cable modem, which is data that comes through that same cable that supplies cable TV. And then we have fiber optic, which is data that comes through fiber optic cables. So different delivery methods for broadband from satellite all the way to fiber optic. And we see that it goes from the slower level, which is satellite, all the way to 5G fiber optic. So just a couple more definitions. We're gonna take a pause now because that was a lot. Usually when we do the educational piece, we like to say, does anyone have any questions? We're gonna break here to see if anybody has any specific questions about the funding information that Tremaine provided, because we do have PBDA present, and we want to see if anybody has any additional questions about the terminology. Additionally, the surveys are being handed out. I know a lot of us are wanting to look through it, but we're also gonna work through that together because there's different sections. So just for the sake of all us being on the same page and moving through it, we're gonna go through it section by section to identify those different components I said earlier. But as they're passing those out, if anyone has any questions about PBDA, the funding, and any of that information, we will have time at the end for any questions, concerns, lived experience, grievances, and kind of encapsulate that because we're gonna take those notes with us.
Okay, no, I want to make sure. I don't want to start. Okay, whoa, that's very loud. Okay, I had a quick question, and if you're going to get to it later, please let me know. But the funding that we're eligible to be receiving now, is that for internet for households specifically, for like possibly a citywide broadband, both, neither? Like, what are we talking about? Yeah.
Hi again, Kaylee with the Authority. So the funding that Tremaine talked about is, in fact, to level set and be very, very clear, it is not available for individual consumers to apply for to be able to get internet access. What it is, it's for eligible entities, and it is, in fact, for infrastructure build out. And it also needs to have what we call a last mile component to it. What does last mile mean? So a lot of people will say, especially in rural areas, I sit between two roads that have connectivity, and I don't have it. Why? I'm a quarter of a mile away from the provider. A lot of times, and I want to be respectful of my provider folks who are in the room, because I also understand and recognize they have a business to run as well. But it's not worth the return on investment for them, because there's not a lot of adoption of the actual service then. So we will make sure that individuals that are getting funds will be in turn making sure that they are providing end service to those users. Jesse, anything else you want to add to that?
And just a small follow-up. I mean, yeah, I understand it's not available to individual residents, but like, could this be used when you say like entities, like by a city, in order to do a citywide, Wi-Fi that anyone within the bounds of the city could use, including like the houseless?
Yeah, so actually we are encouraging large-scale projects. And I know a few cities across the Commonwealth that are looking at providing free Wi-Fi to residents. I have not personally been looking through the applications that we've received, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some like that. I'm going to let Jesse say a few words too.
Yeah, so what I would say is there are scales of technology, like you saw when we were talking slower, faster. And there's a preference for the fiber to the home solution. So fiber going from the middle mile, which is the big pipeline that carries data, to the small pipeline that goes to a household. As the cost gets more and more prohibitive to provide that level of service, we go to a next different type of technology, potentially wireless. So the solution kind of depends on what's the best fit for the community, that Goldilocks type fit for that community. And so the solution may vary. And through the application process, what we're encouraging is multiple types of providers to submit projects. Some of those projects may overlap. And what we'll do as the authority when we're vetting the projects is look at what has the most beneficial impact for the community at the best technology at the best price point. And so that's kind of how we evaluate that. So to answer your question shortly, right, fiber to the home's the primary solution we're searching for, but wireless is an option.
And I think it's important to understand that, like, while it's not like an individual, while it's not an individual thing, right? So I don't want you to feel like, well, why am I here then? It's important to recognize which entities are allowed to get this funding. So if you want something done citywide, dare I say, the city of Harrisburg can certainly work as an entity to be able to apply for some level of funding. But there's also other entities that can do it. So this is a good space to learn that, so that when you champion for these funds and you go to specific entities, you can certainly let them know that they're a viable entity to be able to get it done. So to your question, yes.
Yeah, and to Anna's point, we're talking about two separate plans, two separate pockets of funds, right? The first is BEAD, which is the deployment, the construction, where those entities, those sub-grantees are going to apply. And like Jesse said, their PBDA is going to evaluate the project to, look at the technology, the schedule, the price point, and the impact. But then on the digital equity side, community anchor institutions, there's going to be opportunities for community anchor institutions to come together with creative ideas around enhancing internet access and availability to like those residents in communities similar to like churches, hospitals, etc.
Right. All right. It's my turn again. Got it. Any other questions? Jasmine.
So the BEADS funding is essentially funding for like, would it be cell phone towers? Is that what it's for? Infrastructures for that?
Yeah, is this on? Okay, so BEAD's funding, the BEAD funding is focused on infrastructure development, and that infrastructure development can vary depending on what's the best fit for a community. So it could be fiber optic cables, it could be, or it could be like a fixed wireless solution where you see a, oh, there's Karen. Hello, everybody. Or it could be like a fixed wireless solution where you see a cell phone tower up on a hill and you can get internet service from it. Not so much a cell phone, but it would feed into a modem in your house and you would get internet service for your household. So the technology can vary, but BEAD is focused on developing that infrastructure to support the provision of service to a community.
Because remember, we were talking about unserved and underserved, right? So there's a huge, and for me, the easiest way to understand it is the unserved is more likely our rural communities, right? So if you're driving up in the mountains, I don't got cell phone reception. I can't get a call. The folks that can't access internet, that's the unserved. So those are more likely our rural our rural areas throughout the state. So making sure that they have the infrastructure in place, so when you're driving, up Interstate 81, you have 5G, right? So that's what the BEAD piece is, making sure that the infrastructure is in place in the unserved and underserved communities.
So it is two different, and I did put it back up because I want, the follow-up to this is looking at it from those two different sections. So the BEAD project, like he said, think infrastructure, access, making sure that people have that. And then digital equity is going to answer the question of how do we close that gap now? How do we address the digital divide that's happening so that we have digital equity access? And those are the anchor institutions that can help do that, right? If there's a church that services people, right? If you have like the Downtown Daily Breads or the other institutions that need internet to address that marginalized group, they can argue that this is something that's gonna help address digital equity because I serve this community, right? So that's why if you're a community leader, very important for you to be able to look at those two different things. If you are an entity, definitely look into this and see how you all can look at the infrastructure piece of it. But there's a piece of this in between those two programs that will help in the totality of what we're looking at for the city of Harrisburg.
Okay, so it's not just the city of Harrisburg necessarily applying for this. It's entities within the city of Harrisburg applying for this,
So right
or
now, nobody's applying, right? So let's back up. So could the city of Harrisburg put in for an infrastructure program? Yes. Could me, Anna White, try to say, hey, I need infrastructure around my house at this address? Likely not, right? But if I am a coordinator at a program and I'm looking at digital equity, that's that kind of level, if I'm not mistaken, that I would be able to have that argument, right? So we're looking at two different things, infrastructure and addressing digital equity. So there's a space for larger entities to argue for infrastructure and access and deployment. And then there's a section for community anchors to be able to look at digital equity, unless I chop that up.
I'll just work to provide some clarity here. So BEAD funding is a funding source that's available to eligible entities. So local government, nonprofit organizations, or current like internet service providers. So for instance, Dauphin County or Harrisburg City or Swatara Township could apply. Just like a rural electrical cooperative could apply, or Comcast or Verizon, or any number of other service providers could apply. They apply for funding and they have to prove certain things to us through an application about the project, that it has the appropriate impact on a community, that's focused on underserved or unserved BSLs, that it has an impact on a disadvantaged community. BSL's broadband serviceable location. So like a household, let's just say, for instance. And I apologize for that. Speak this stuff all day, every day, and you just start talking in acronyms. But they have to prove this through the funding application process. And one of the things I wanted to mention too is in that process, they can seek letters of support. So I would just tell you, if your community, if you know your community's putting in, if Harrisburg City were to put in an application or partner with a service provider to put an application in, they could seek a letter of support from a community group to help advocate for that project through the grant application process. But to just provide some additional clarity here, any local government, any city government, any internet service provider, and any nonprofit could apply for this funding, and then they would be vetted the same as any other applicant.
Could you talk about the digital equity one? So if you're not one of those large service providers, what would fall under the digital equity one? And if you did not want to provide a letter of support to join an entity, could you, at just the nonprofit level, be able to apply, it sounds like?
So I will address that in 1 second, Anna. I also want to just add to what Jesse said. As the outreach and engagement manager for the authority, I want to make it very clear that we have engaged all levels of government. So we have engaged all the associations. So we're talking about County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania, PA Association of Borough Supervisors, Township Supervisors, PA Municipal League. So we have engaged all of those entities that have an opportunity and are eligible to apply with all of the information that's going on about what the authority is doing. That said, in regards to digital equity, we in full transparency, we have not started drafting any guidelines for programs because we don't yet know what we're getting. It is based on a formula that is applied to what is known as the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, National Broadband Map. We don't know yet what that formula looks like. A similar formula was created under the BEAD program, which allocated the Commonwealth with the $1.16 billion that we have to be able to deploy out to expand infrastructure. So as far as digital equity is concerned, Anna, you're not off base. I envision similar eligible entities. I am not sure they will be exactly apples to apples. So right now, as Jesse said, we're talking about providers, local units of government, nonprofits, and partnerships there within. But digital equity will focus a lot on making sure that once we have the access there, you can afford it, it's reliable, it's sustainable, you have the skills you need to understand how to maneuver the internet and maneuver it safely. And on top of that, we want to make sure you have the right devices. A cell phone is not an acceptable device for people to be able to do telehealth, apply for jobs, do their work, talk to family. It's just not, period. We need to make sure people have the right devices within their hands. They know how to use them. They know how to use them safely. I hope that helps answer the question. Go ahead, Jesse.
So I just want to take a step back. So when I was up here and we're up here and we just threw a whole lot of information at you about technology and access, and I just want to make sure that the answers that the authority has provided answered the question you had. So I just want to make sure that something, I said BSLs. If there's anything like that you have a question about, feel free to hit me up.
I think you're successful. You answered a question before I got to answer it, so thank you for that. One of the questions I was going to ask was, for the BEAD program, is there an application out there online already?
Go ahead, Jesse.
All right, so for BEAD, there is not an application out there. So it's a multi-tiered process that we have to go through as the authority. So we know that we were allocated $1.16 billion for BEAD. And so the federal government said, here's this money. Now what they've said is you have to have a 5-year action plan that kind of expresses, over the course of 5 years, what are you as an authority going to do to ensure that you meet the needs of your community? Internet for all. So we put that 5-year action plan out there. We put it out for public comment. We received those comments. We put it in front of our board. It's been approved. NTIA looked at, and it's available online. And it's been accepted by NTIA. So now the next step is we have to begin working on an initial proposal. And that initial proposal is what we provide to NTIA that says, I'm sorry.
National Telecommunications and Information Administration, right?
Yes, sir. Good catch. And sorry about that. But we then we have to develop an initial proposal for NTIA that outlines how we're going to make an application available to eligible applicants, so municipal governments, cities, internet service providers, nonprofits, what that application is going to require, how we're going to evaluate what people tell us to make sure it's truthful and adequate, and then how we're going to compare competing applications. So for instance, if two entities apply to provide service in Harrisburg City, obviously, we don't want to spend money twice in one place, so how do we pick the best project? So, sorry about that. So, we're in the initial proposal phase right now. Once that initial proposal is approved, and we have about 8 months from now to get that done, then we'll post guidelines for the application process, and the application would then open.
Okay, thanks. Last question. Do you have any current data based on the population of Pennsylvania on who's in the digital divide? Like rough numbers on, the state of Pennsylvania, counties, cities, what does the digital divide look like in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so I didn't come prepared with maps, and I apologize for that. But yeah, we have a data set, a map, essentially, that is called the Digital Divide Index. And that digital divide index takes into account multiple factors throughout communities within Pennsylvania for the entire state and adds them together essentially to say, here's areas that have a high level of digital divide, which means they don't have access or they have a lack of understanding of how to use the access, how to use technology. And then here's areas that are really proficient in that. So we have that. And then currently what we're working on is the FCC has a map, the Federal Communications Commission has a map, a fabric they call it, of all the addresses in the state of Pennsylvania. And then they classify those addresses as served, meaning they meet that speed threshold and have internet access, underserved, or unserved. And so what we're going through right now is a process of evaluating that map to make sure it's accurate, and where we feel it's inaccurate, we're updating that data and providing that to the FCC so they can then update their national map. So there are two data sets, the Digital Divide Index and the broadband serviceable location fabric that tells us who's unserved, underserved, or served by internet service. Does that answer your question?
And there's also a series of maps inside the 5-year action plan as well. So that, basically gives, just various levels of data. I wish we had a link to the 5-year action plan somewhere, in the PowerPoint. But I would say, get on PBDA's website and try to take a look at that action plan, and that should answer a lot of the questions.
And I'm happy to hand anyone a business card. It has my email address on it. If you have a question about that, you could just send it to me and I'll respond.
As am I.
I have a question about the proposals that businesses can give for the beads. So let's say a business has a proposal for an area. Does that proposal, does the community now know about this proposal? Does it get sent to a city council? Do they have a say-so in it? Because sometimes in some areas, communities might not want, let's say, a 5G tower being built in their area for whatever health concerns or such things.
Would you like to see this one? Okay, so for the, as we said with BEAD, we don't have a fully fleshed out plan and approach for how some of this is going to happen. But here's what I can tell you. We have another grant program we're working on right now, and as part of that, what we have done is once we received grant applications, we drew an outline on a map of where the projects were going to be, and we're providing local governments the opportunity to comment on those projects. And so they should be using the feedback they're getting from their constituency about technologies and concerns you have and these community conversations to inform their commenting on those projects. So there is an opportunity for the representatives of the community to comment on projects as they become available.
Yeah, and that map is on our website. It is accessible to anybody. The input period will not be open to anybody, but you can go on that map at any given time and take a look at the project areas that are being proposed. That map will be iterative. As we're going through each phase of reviewing applications, some that show currently viable after a technical scrub is done, after a challenge period is done, they may no longer be viable. They may no longer be considered for funding. So I just want to make that clear and kind of level set. Go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering, as this infrastructure is being built, what interaction is there with companies and providers? I find it frustrating that until very recently there was only Comcast as an option in our area, and my understanding is that that's true in a lot of areas in Pennsylvania, and that's to some degree, and my understanding is somewhat limited of this, but to some degree a reflection of deals that have been made in government with Comcast. So my sense is I'm curious if there's going to be opportunities for more competition in the provider area.
So as with anything economic based, there will be an opportunity for competition, but it depends on how that competition is presented. It's a fiscal thing. So if there's an area where there's 1 or 2 unserved broadband locations, and Comcast is in that area and they say they're going to service that, it's pretty economical. They're going to come in at a good price point. Now, if there's an area, let's say, in a rural county where there's no one, then the opportunity for competition is a lot greater. So it's really dependent on the scenario. So it's a pretty loaded question, but there is opportunity for interaction between the entities completing the projects and us. But it's a loaded question. It comes down to economics, and in some cases, like I said, we're going to see high levels of competition, and then in some cases, we might see lower levels of competition.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, I'm not trying to catch anybody out, but it is something that as a consumer I've been frustrated by because there's really no competition and the prices have gone up and up and up in recent years and there's been no other option. And my understanding is just that that's not unique to this area in Pennsylvania.
So one thing I will say to your point is, in some cases in communities in Pennsylvania, there's a thing called a franchise agreement, which is essentially an agreement between a provider of a certain type of service and a community to utilize the community's right-of-ways. And those franchise agreements are in a right-of-way is like when you have a street and the street is paved, let's say that's 24 feet wide. Most people don't know this, right? The city or the town actually owns like another 5 feet. So if you have a yard right along that road, you actually don't own some of that yard. That's called right-of-way. That's the town's right-of-way. And so when they enter into a franchise agreement, it gives a provider exclusive access to that right-of-way to put their infrastructure in. So they might put their telephone poles in and hang their lines, or they might bury cables. When those franchise agreements exist, it can be difficult for other providers to come into an area to provide a different service, a competitive service. One of the things that the Broadband Authority is doing is creating a program called the Broadband Ready Community. And the Broadband Ready Community is targeted at reducing barriers to competition and provision of service at affordable rates in communities. And one of the things we're looking at is various township or local municipal laws that prohibit certain actions like cutting a street open to put infrastructure in, or those franchise agreements. And if the community is willing to make some adjustments to their laws and ordinances, then they can be designated as a broadband ready community, which would be advertised widely to encourage investment in those communities. So that's one avenue we're taking to try to encourage competition and encourage infrastructure build out and reduce barriers.
See him coming over.
Yeah.
Sneaking up on me. Is there anything in your plan that includes educating these communities that are unserved and or underserved about some things that they will have within their selection or choice making? For example, I'm amazed at the number of people who believe that they can't afford quality internet because they're paying for cable TV, and they're not educated the fact that everything they get on TV, if they just only purchase from these same companies their internet service, they'll get all the TV, but it'll be streamed, but every channel, real time, just by doing, combining or aggregating their services all through that. My experience is, particularly with family members and loved ones that I know of, a lot of times they won't get the internet they need because they don't want to lose their Jeopardy or their channel that they watch every day. And from where I'm sitting, a lot of the affordability is in just knowing that what's available to them, that they can actually have both, but for a lot less.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Do we have anything in our 5-year action plan that lends to affordability? Is that really the
Lends
end
towards
question?
empowering that community in which you're looking to make this stuff available, because during those 5 years, people are still going to be without and or have reasons for not being able to access the internet.
Sure. So, yeah, there are some steps in there about how we're going to educate folks. One of the things that we have to do is pull together what's called an asset inventory from across the Commonwealth of educational courses, maybe digital literacy courses, maybe device programs that are available across the Commonwealth already, and how we will engage them into the work that we are doing. So yes, there is a clear understanding of needing to educate our communities on what's available, but what we're going to do is we're going to partner with the leaders in those communities that are maybe already paving the way for this to be able to get that information out. To Anna's point before, community anchor institutions, libraries get things out, aging departments get things out, local community centers get things out. So we are partnering with a lot of these entities across the Commonwealth to make sure that we will have educational resources available. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, somewhat. It's just that, you know, there's those parts of our community that will never make it to a library or shut-ins or whatever the reason may be. And because of their lifestyle, they must have their TV, not just for their shows, but for some other reasons that they may need it. And what I've found, and when I do help people like that, their cost goes down and they end up with more just because they stop subscribing to these ridiculous programming channels when they're going to get it anyway in their package for internet. And so, so that's just my feedback. But I imagine that will happen through the community leaders anyway.
Yeah, and I think to your point, you know, people don't understand that there are some of these providers out there that offer these package deals, right? It's kind of siloed. So, for example, I'm just going to call out, you know, one provider in particular. I know Comcast has Internet Essentials, which offers a package deal on your internet at a lower cost. And I don't know how many of you are familiar, but there is a federal communications program out right now called the Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP. Right now it offers up to a $30 a month discount on your internet only. So to your point, if you've got a combination deal where your bill includes your cable and your internet and maybe a home phone or a cell phone, the discount's only going to be applied to the internet portion of the bill. However, if you are in Comcast territory and you qualify for the Internet Essentials, which is $10 a month, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you could essentially get your internet for free. Now, you're not going to get the additional 20. Okay, it's only going to be up to the amount of your internet bill. But I also read recently that the FCC is increasing that. So right now on tribal lands, which Pennsylvania does not have any, and high-cost allocated areas, they're offering up to $75 a month discount on your internet. That is going to be applied across the board to everybody in every state and every territory. Additionally, the ACP offers up to a $100 discount one time on a device as well. So there are a lot of programs out there. One of the things I will be transparent about with the ACP is that it is currently scheduled to run out of funding in April of 24. We at the Authority find this program extremely helpful and have been doing a lot of work to advocate down at Congress to ensure that they continue to fund this program.
Make sure you put that in your survey when we get to that, so that the reason that we are collecting data in specific spaces is to hear what the pulse is of that community. If that's something that the audience that you're serving is dealing with, this is the time to put that in the survey and collect that feedback. So while we are taking notes, I want to encourage you guys to really put a lot of these kind of thought-provoking and have you considered inside of these surveys as well when we get to those parts. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to get it out while it's fresh on my mind. Kind of touches base on education, like this gentleman said. And if you guys are touching base on this later on in the presentation, just let me know. What kind of peace of mind can you offer to those like conspiracy theorists to say, okay, this is just like a ploy
we won't be getting to that.
Like what kind of like saying like we are really legitimately trying to just offer just for underserved or areas that don't have internet at all. This is just legitimately, this is not a way for the government to get up in your business, because there's some people that live off the grid for a reason, you know? What kind of peace of mind can you offer to those people that say like that this is legitimately just trying to get you access to, you know, applying for jobs and all the things that you've said, like If you get what I'm saying, like
Oh,
how
I 100% understand what you're saying, and I get it. So it's kind of like the ACP, right? You got to sign up for it, but you have to give all of this information, and people go, wait a second, you're the government. I don't want you to have my information. No way. You're not going to stalk me and track what I'm doing. So I get it. I can't sit here and tell you that when we get people connected, that there aren't going to be potential risks to the information that's shared, right? That's the internet. But that's where the educational piece comes into play, that digital literacy, that making sure people understand how to navigate the internet and navigate it safely. They can spot cybersecurity red flags, things of that nature. So these are all things that we are thinking about, and we will be tying into. We are writing a state digital equity plan as well. We will be putting that out for public comment. We will be doing some facilitated comment on that. So these are all things that are extremely important, and I want you to hold on to them, and I want you to engage when we come time for getting people's input on this, because you're absolutely right. I can't sit here and tell you, yep, we're gonna make sure you're 100% safe, you're never gonna be hacked, nobody's ever gonna trick you. I can't do that. We as the PBDA don't have that control. But I think making sure that we educate people on the safe way to navigate the internet and their devices is where that's gonna come into play. Well, as far as the government, oh, I'm sorry, and I didn't realize you were standing right behind me. As far as the government stealing your information, I mean, I can't fight a conspiracy theorist. People are always going to have their thoughts, their opinions, their fears. We're not doing this to try to capture people's information or do anything of that nature.
So let's take a moment to focus in on some cultural sensitivity. One of the reasons that I know Black and Brown communities believe that their information is being usurped or the 5G tower is going to do a thing is because there is historical grounding in some of that. People's information has been usurped in different ways. The government has done that. Okay, so I didn't get any amen, so I was just turning around, see what was going on. So when we talk about this from this perspective, having talking points, a culturally sensitive talking points for communities like Harrisburg are important because there are real concerns with what seems like just a conspiracy theory, right? So some things just seem to be, well, you know, people just believe whatever they want to believe. But some of these things are very much rooted in very real, tangible, historical occurrences. And I wouldn't even, historical's even pushing it, right? Some of these things happened not too long ago. So just a cultural touch point to make sure that we're all level setting to the types of communities that we would serve across the Commonwealth.
I appreciate that, Kamika, and I would be happy to learn more. You know, maybe it's something I don't have enough education on, and I need to learn a little bit more about where this comes from, but I think it's an important topic that we need to continue discussing.
For fair, stepping back into my Anna hat, I will say that part of the digital equity work and why it's important to stay on top of entities and those recommendations that they ask for communities is we understood with the incident with COVID across spaces that entities and authorities miss the mark. And entities and authorities are not, and I'm air quoting respectfully, the entities that go into the trenches to instill trust, right? Historically, that's not the first person that you think like, oh, I can't wait for the authority to get here to give me the trust in the thing, right? Because for lack of whatever, right? So whether it's wrong or not, whether it's conspiracy or historical or not, I think that's why there's such a push for trusted community people in addressing it and things like this, like commenting in public comments so we can capture the things that we need to capture. I think it's important to note that, right? So whenever there's a pulse that's missing, I think when people come into the community, that's when you reset and level set with conversations like that. Like, yeah, I don't know what you guys plan to do in the Commonwealth, but let me tell you what we believe here in Harrisburg is that the towers are doing the thing, right? So that people can understand, okay, I'm gonna build when I get to Harrisburg, there's a little razzle dazzle that happens there, right? There's this type of, right? Because people need, part of the data is cultural competency. Part of the data collection is understanding what backyard you're in. So as much as you can, please be mindful of that when you are giving public information. Be mindful of that when you see things go up for public comment and community input to make sure that they're not building and you're the last to know, right? So make sure that you're writing down these entities, writing down these contracts, writing down all these initials so that when they are coming into your community, you are making sure that the pulse is given by the people that are in the trenches before they literally come into the trenches to do the work, right? So I put that balance of authority on literally the authority, but also the community authority first. Does that make sense? So that is part of that digital equity when you're talking about nonprofits and trusted community members coming in.
And I would say, I definitely very much value the community organization. That's why we're here talking to you today. So when you're talking about conspiracy theories, like I can talk to you about the fact that we're doing the same thing. We're trying to do the same thing in Harrisburg that we're trying to do in other communities that look different and have different cultural beliefs. And we encounter some of the same thought processes. They come from different places, and I understand that. I make an effort to understand that. So what I can offer is when you're encountering those issues, if you work through your community organizations, and they can have a direct line to the authority, and we can work together to find a way to message so that everyone is getting the clear, culturally specific message that they need to put those fears at ease. That's part of what we're trying to do. That's why we're here today. That's why we're in every community we can be in across Pennsylvania, regardless of its cultural background or beliefs, is to try to get this message out. And that's why we're engaged with the community organizations we're engaged with today, because we know that they help balance us to provide this message. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you're encountering people who have those beliefs, work with your local community organizations that are present today, and they can work with us, and we'll work to develop an education process that works in your community, not an education process that's supposed to blanket the entire state as if it's all one thing. Hey, you can hold me accountable.
I will try to be clear. I had a migraine earlier, so my words might not come out. You maybe Brandon help me if I'm not making sense. Yeah. So it's 1.2 billion, right, for PA, and I'm guessing that's like a finite number, and like when it's gone, right? It's like a one-time deal. Are there going to be like checks and balances or some kind of regulations around the ratio of just like capitalists swooping in and just like scooping up all the money as opposed to community members? Like, how is that going to be balanced out?
That's a great question, and we've encountered that question a couple times, throughout the course. And I think, PBDA is working on, just what that responsibility looks like after the fact. After the 1.2 billion is spent on the construction, and then what that responsibility looks like. So is it embedded in the contract? Is it embedded in, the agreement that PBDA has with the providers who's going to be building it out? But yeah, just that maintenance and upkeep, and just the responsibility of it all is definitely something that that they're talking about. I don't know if Kelly or Jesse can provide more, but trust me, it's definitely embedded in the process and how you administer the agreements that's going to be had as a result of the 1.2 billion.
Yeah, so as with any grant program, there are requirements to apply for the money. You say you're going to do something, and we evaluate the grant, and we say, okay, well, you said you're going to do something, it's adequate. We're going to award you money. Now, that money is going to be reimbursable. We're not just going to give people a lump sum. It's going to be reimbursable. So when you have an expenditure, when you spend money, you submit to me what you have spent, and I'll look at it. And if it's approvable, right, if it's within the guidelines of what we said, if it meets the criteria, we'll approve it, and that will be reimbursed to you. So there are some checks and balances in terms of the fact that people aren't just going to come in, get lump sums of money, and disappear, okay? The other thing is there's built into these guidelines are requirements for workforce development. They have to engage in some level of workforce continuation, right? So we're not just bringing in outsiders and doing it, and then, you know, the workforce is depleted, and, you know, people aren't learning how to do new things and maintain stuff, right? We're doing workforce development. Pennsylvania has laws about prevailing wage. They have to pay the workers on these projects that are receiving public money a prevailing wage, which is above what we would call a living wage. It's, you know, paying them their fair share to do the work they're going to do. So there are all these guidelines in place at the federal level. There are guidelines in place at the state level that dictate how money can be spent, to whom money can be distributed, and then how it has to be reported. So there will be large companies that come in and do work. There will be small companies that come in and do work, but they all have to meet the same criteria in terms of their reporting and how they're spending money.
Just as a follow-up, when you guys have your applications and you have your selection criteria, do you know what they're going to be at all? Will any of those be about serving like marginalized and vulnerable communities as opposed to just ones that they find profitable?
Yeah, so as we discussed, and I believe we have more presentation to kind of go through, and we'll have another question session.
I was
will
about to say,
answer
I
that,
love
and then
us.
I'm gonna hand the microphone
I love
off.
us because we are like, before you get to the next slide, I love this, but.
No, so I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to I'm going to turn the microphone off and run away, and then I'll come back later. But essentially, like I kind of said previously, so the focus is on broadband serviceable locations that either don't have service or don't have enough service. And then, you know, on top of that is like the whole, you know, the way it's referred to as like a disadvantaged community or historically disadvantaged community or rural community, the areas that have historically kind of struggled, you know, at or below middle class or you know, cultural type discrepancies and things like that. So yes, there's a focus on those communities to ensure that there is an equitable application of the funding.
Yeah, so the NTIA, they put out guidance, right? You know, in reference to covered populations is what we're calling them, right? So those underserved populations and those unserved populations and who they represent, right? So, you know, people of color, people with disabilities, people living in rural areas, formerly incarcerated individuals. So there's guidance out there as to how this plan and even specifically the workforce piece, you know, should apply to, you know, these groups. You know, so for instance, we're looking at 5 years of build out. And the interesting thing is, it's not just Pennsylvania, it's across the country. So in years past, and I'll just, you know, for example, a Comcast, if a Comcast was building a project, you know, anywhere in Pennsylvania, they could pull crews from any other state to come here and build the project. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case now because those folks are going to be busy in those states. So the workforce component is huge. You're looking at thousands of people that are going to need to be trained to do the work. And I think it was maybe a week or two ago, Governor Shapiro just put out an executive order where he's committing up to $400 million for the Commonwealth Workforce Transformation Program, meaning that eligible individuals can get up to $40,000 to be trained and then also receive wraparound services, whether it's childcare, transportation, et cetera, to get folks trained to do work on any IIJA project. So it's not only, you know, broadband, but it's the other infrastructure work that's going to fall under the IIJA.
I'm really proud of us. Give yourselves a round of a hand for real questions and coming in and doing that whole part. We do have a section where we do want to capture personal stories, grievances. You know, that's always my time that I love to allot a lot of time for. to make sure that we honor your voices and your experiences. But I do want to just run through this survey really quickly because we do have this part, and then we're going to run right into personal stories and any other type of questions or experiences. If you don't have a survey, can you please raise your hand? Charmaine is going to come around.
I was collecting.
Collecting them? Okay. Well, see what y'all did? If you're still taking the survey,
I mean, or unless they, I
is
thought
anybody still taking it? I feel like we just did
I
a
know, I
lot today.
thought- yeah, I saw everyone.
Okay.
Like they stopped writing, so.
Okay. Well, an hour ago, we had wanted to do this together. Um, so I'll just actually go through it if you're still working through it, because I do want to make sure and honor everyone's level of comfortability with it. We are going to go over that first section of access and subscriptions. So it's just asked, do you have a device to access the internet? Does your household currently have access to home internet? Which of the following internet subscriptions do you have at home? What company? Seems like it's limited, but what company is your internet service provider? What is the speed of your internet? So on and so forth. So actually, I think the best way to do this is we're going to move through the sections, and then if we have any questions or concerns about a section, you can raise your hand and somebody will come over and help facilitate. If you are online, I know Dr. Campbell's posting the link to the survey, so you can take that and join us in about 10 minutes. But we will be here to answer any questions if you're like, hey, number 14 doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna give this about 10 minutes so we can move right into the rest of the feedback and notes that we need from you all. All right, I'm a teacher in my past life, so I know that talking means we're done. Talking means we're wrapping up, okay? If you hear me, clap once. So I'm getting a sense that you all are completing and wrapping up your surveys. We do want to have a very intentional questions, stories, issues, space. I know we did a lot of good work in the beginning answering some of those questions that you all have, but this next part is really you all's turn to give perspective on your community, the pulse, the opinions, the concerns, the lived experience that you all have. So if you have any additional questions at all, anything that came to mind in the last hour, anything that the survey has brought up for you, or any story that you came here prepared to share, or any issues that arise in your day-to-day experience. I did hear about traveling and living in different complexes and things like that, so we want to hear individual feedback at this time. I think we'll start with Dr. Campbell.
So I think one of the things that I'm looking forward to understanding how this plan to update the infrastructure in the state will address is, even though we have internet essentials and it is cheaper and things, and it gives people access to the internet, just like Dwayne was talking about, when I've purchased the top speed that I can get for my area, top speed of internet, but they ratchet it down. So I know they're ratcheting down the lower ones as well. So I'm just wondering, and just throwing out there, how we putting into atmosphere how we can address these speed issues where they tell you it's one speed on paper, but when if you're testing like me, I'm incessantly testing because I always have house gas, I always have things I need to do. How are we going to ensure that the minimum speed is actually a real minimum and it's not one of those ratcheted down situations where three-fourths of the month you're getting a speed that's not the advertised speed, particularly when it comes to students. That's one thing that happened during the pandemic. You saw students of color, especially in our region, here in Greater Harrisburg area and South Central PA, they dropped off of virtual learning at astronomically higher rates than their peers. And one of the main reasons, even though they had devices from their schools, was internet connectivity in their neighborhoods. So just wanted to kind of like throw that out there.
I think this is like an open discussion, so doesn't have to be in question form. You can just be like, I feel a way about this today. And we're just jotting those notes in the back as you all are speaking. So any issues raised, digital equity, any lived experiences, any things that you want to be considered, please share.
So one of the things to consider, and I think a lot of people sometimes forget about this, is yes, you can buy the fastest internet that Verizon will sell you, but if your device is operating on Windows 98, it won't work. So I think I still have a Windows 98 at home, but I think that's the other part of education on the rate at which technology is giving us new devices. And I work at a place where we gave you a laptop for work 3 years ago. The warranty's up on it. The computer still works fine, but they're like, yeah, we got to get rid of it because there's something new out. Windows 12 is here, so you got to upgrade your device. So I think a lot of times we have devices that can't keep pace with the internet speed that we have, and then if you don't understand it, I think it could lead to a little bit of frustration. But you also got to do all those things and be educated on how the devices work. So along with the internet speed, the device is really important. Or you can't afford to. Yeah, so we bought that computer 2 years ago, and it still seems like it works, but it's slow. Well, yeah, I can't afford it. Yeah.
I think all the providers were going through that, where they would they would develop things in their systems that if you do all the updates, it's going to slow down your speeds. That was a part of it, but they were held accountable. So I was going to ask if there's anything in your project that will hold providers accountable. If any of you at home will try a speed test, whatever you're paying for, 9 times out of 10, if you do a speed test, you're not even close to what you're paying for. If I was doing it, it'd be a scam, right? But they're doing it, and no one's holding them. And I'm wondering if there's something you can do. I pay for 1,000 megas. And I guarantee, and no matter when I try it, unless I called them and complained and threatened them, it's going to always be between 400 and 600. But it's happened to you too. You guys just don't know it. But what Kamika was saying is, if it happens at the highest levels, imagine what it means when a guy's paying for 25 and he's dropping off from his class because that's all they can afford. So I'm wondering with this 1.2 billion, you're going to regulate who they hire and how they hire, right? If the state does that, is there anything in your plan that uses some of that money to hold them accountable so we don't have to check up on it? We shouldn't even have to, and most of the time we wouldn't even know to do it.
Okay. Okay. I had just two real quick ones. One is I wanted to say that not only, like, as they said, do we need a minimum on what you're promised, but, and I'm very tech illiterate. Mine works well enough for me, but I have a lot of neighbors who we don't offer the same level in like Harrisburg as they do in some of the bigger cities. And now that telework's a thing, we're getting a lot of spillover. A lot of my neighbors are from Philadelphia, New York, parts of New Jersey, because they can work here when the cost of living is better. They can work there where the cost of living is, but be living here. And we don't even offer the kind of like connectivity they would need to do the kind of works they do, let alone that it's getting throttled down. I mean, what we're saying is our max isn't what they're used to, isn't what they're, what they need. And then the other thing I just wanted to throw out, and I've been kind of like, I know I've been pushing at it the whole time because I always do, but like, it is important to help like vulnerable neighborhoods and households, but we have large swaths of unhoused people and their only access to the internet are public institutions like libraries. And when you get like downtown, those library computers are limited and they're full all day, and getting on one and for any period of time that they need it to be able to fill out job applications or keep up on anything is horribly limited. So a cell phone is not, adequate to a lot of things, but it's one thing that a lot of them have and could at least use if they had access to some kind of internet that would be fast enough to, do what they need. So, like, keeping households and rural households in mind is important, but I mean, please keep in mind those who don't even have that. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having this. Okay, so for people like myself, I'm from the generation I learned off of a typewriter and then I finally graduated to a computer. Most of us still have issues with the hardware and keeping up with all of the software updates and, and what devices to use and how to use them properly. So even if I have the best of the best of the best, I feel like I'm not really utilizing it well. And second of all, I live with a person who wants to go back to a rotary phone, okay? He is a conspiracy theorist, and it's like a challenge because you're trying to educate people, and saying that we do need this technology, but I completely comprehend why people do not trust it yet. So if there's some kind of way to conduct these types of meetings with that sensitivity, I really see the success, in that. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to capture that across generations, there may be some education that's needed, but also in providing education so that if you are going to make an informed decision to trust it or not, you at least have that information to make that informed decision about it. Okay, thank you. I know there's no Spanish-speaking people in here, so I'll take my hat off a little bit and say language barrier can be also another component to consider, right? So the things that different cultures, right? So I know a lot of Spanish people are international conversations, right? The ability to use your phone, to use the WhatsApp or things like that, right? Versus what people would usually use the phone with. A lot of people use their phone for everything but calling people. So it does serve as their computer, right? I know a lot of people that are coming home from incarceration, that is their computer, right? Because we don't have a laptop, we don't have this, right? So how people value that cell phone, depending on your situation, can really feel like a laptop, right? If that's the only thing that you have. And then how do you manage or get the education around that? Good points. All right, I'm coming.
While we were highlighting some of our, I guess, underrepresented communities, made me think about my grandfather during COVID. He cannot hear, he's 100% deaf. He has cochlear implants, but that doesn't work well. It's very robotic. So when a lot of things went to telehealth and having to use the internet to do things, especially because he's a lot older, he has relied, because people have not taken the time to learn sign language, he has relied on learning people's mouths and reading lips. And that was very difficult for COVID during trying to get through doctor's visits and trying to explain like what's going on. And having a slow internet connection definitely did not help with that. And then he gets frustrated as an older person. And then trying to be the person to like be the liaison between both of them, everybody's frustrated. And it's just because there's a lag. So it's a big deal. I want to think about our deaf and not hearing community as well.
Thank you. And those are unique populations that through lived experience, you're able to be here and advocate for, right? So Spanish speaking, across generations, those who have difficulty hearing, blind and deaf communities, and people who are unhoused. Very unique opportunities to advocate here today. So I encourage, if you have experience, lived experience, or if you're a community worker that can share those lived experiences, please do.
On the topic of accessibility, one of the things that I know a lot about, specifically with neurodivergent people, is just the accessibility of government websites and like things that you need to do to function as a person in the society. And some of those websites are just highly inaccessible. And I do UX design, and I could just look at it and be like, people aren't filling out these forms right because this system. And so I'm wondering if there's any room within the digital equity program for overhauls on accessibility and cultural competency in the websites as well, because some of that is just, it's like you have to have a brain that thinks in just such a specific way sometimes to get through those, and a lot of people will just give up, and then they're not accessing the services they need to, or they're doing things that get them punished because they're not, operating in the system the way they have to. So I'm just wondering if there's any room for those kind of things within the digital equity.
Hold on a minute, we have an answer.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, a lot of the information that we put out, we ensure it comes out in multiple languages. We have a Braille version of our survey. We are working on doing some focus groups around the disabled community specifically. So yes, these are all important things. This is what equity is about. Equity means everybody. It's not just this group or that group. So absolutely, these are things that will be kept in mind. They will be a part of our statewide digital equity plan when we write that. And there are pieces of that included in our 5-year action plan. Thanks for your question.
I know earlier I deferred a couple people's comments, which I'm nosy, so I want to hear again, about affordability and satisfaction. Does anyone want to share their lived experience around affordability? We did have some comments here about making sure that you test for the speed because it's not giving what it's supposed to give. Earlier I had asked, do people go in and pick based off of, I have $80 and this is all I have, right? So are there experiences where people feel like they have to simply just get what they're given because of affordability and satisfaction? Anybody feel comfortable speaking on that? Now I'm just giving y'all prompts because I know y'all got things to say.
I went to this college that we're sitting in. And when I went to this college, I could not afford anything, not because it's college, because I was in college. But of course I needed internet because of my being alone and stuff and having to write papers, X, Y, and Z. The only internet that I could afford, because everything then was about affordability. I'm not worrying about speed. I'm not worrying about any of that. I need it. This is what I can afford. I think it was called Clear, and it was like a little hotspot, and it was only a couple of dollars a month, and I took it everywhere with me in my pocket. Yeah. And I took it everywhere with me in my pocket, and sometimes it was really, really trash, and you had to put it on some of the beams, and but it's what I had, and that's what I could afford. And that's just what it is. So it's like, you know, while some people may be educated on fiber optics and cable modems and 5G, 4G, all that stuff, sometimes it just doesn't matter. I can't afford it.
I got it. Thanks. I do work with a nonprofit where when COVID hit, a lot of the families, of course, had to support their sick child, doctor's visits, and then the other healthy children had to go to school. And affordability was a huge problem as we're not here to subsidize that type of thing. We found ourselves funding just access to quality internet with a lot of the funds we had coming in for these sick children. Their focus was no longer health. It was all just about getting them access so you can get proper care and the kids can still be educated. And it was amazing. This is what made me talk about television. It's amazing that none of the cable companies tell people you can get you don't have to pay for a separate cable channel or a combined package. So I just still believe that part of it is that illusion because the way the world used to work. They are capitalizing hugely because of this phenomenon of people believing they don't have, oh, I gotta watch my fights. I don't wanna miss football. I don't wanna miss this or that. And they can get it all through streaming. And so what we had to do is we tried to educate some of the families if, look, your child's education is so important, even if you think you're gonna miss Jeopardy and all these things, you're just gonna have to miss it. Or there are apps, we can help you maybe find a used smart television. But I think some of the affordability is not around it not being affordable. I believe it's around what we don't know about what it would cost us if they taught us how to use their product. And they don't tell us so that we can pay for everything. So that's my thought. What I found is a lot of families, we had to find creative ways to help them because we ran out of money trying to help them because that's monthly. And we had to help them to restructure how they're paying for this. And you'd be amazed. And the poorest of families, how many spend more than $150 a month on television? When they can get those same TV channels if they just bought better internet. So that's my thought.
Part of the conversation also is about that digital skill set, right? So I know with unique populations coming in, right, those who are incarcerated coming home, those who are across generations trying to get up to date on things, there's a lot of digital skill set gaps. And we know that if you have a unique education system, that they don't always allow for digital skill sets to be taught within the educational system. Any lived experiences or any ideas on what specific digital skills are lacking? Or any that can be brought into neighborhoods that you feel would be, like you said, that's an example of digital skills and education that can be brought in. What are some other ones in this area that you think may be necessary or that you've experienced with your audiences or your consumers or your clients? So how to do video calls was usually a big one around 2020. That was a skill set that was much needed and necessary that we maybe didn't need to know before. Anything else that has struck out in the past couple of years that you're like, okay, Harrisburg needs to get in tune with how to teach people how to do this. With incarcerated individuals, if you've been incarcerated for 30 years, you're starting from the top because we're out of that completely if technology is increasing every single day.
One of them is application navigation, being able to identify what applications are there, absolutely free. If you want to watch reruns, TV, anything, or make phone calls to your native country, there are apps for everything, and there's a ton of them with no cost. You just might see an ad or two. And that needs to be educated because I'm telling you, as consumers, we're paying through the nose. Our population is already at risk financially, and they just don't know. And my thoughts are that the world our educational system is preparing us for no longer exists. They have to catch up eventually because it's not really the provider's responsibility. It's our communities itself. And so that's my thought. There needs to be an education on that. If you need to do something, if you're homeless or whatever your situation is, if you have a phone or even can get to the internet, they should be able to do whatever they need to do. And most of those things can occur just by having an education on applications for those devices.
Good, thank you.
Is this thing on? Okay, not only the navigation of applications, but filing of taxes. You know, there's a lot of information out there that a lot of people need to have access to learn about what they qualify for, you know, different deductions and itemized things that could probably help them, you know, get a better tax return or owe less or understand why they owe and what they can do to prevent that in the future and things like that. You know, some people don't have the resources to go to H&R Block or Jackson Hewitt, or they may not trust them. You know, so there's probably a lot of people out there that because they feel some sort of way about it, they just kind of avoid it altogether and hope that they, you know, skate through the system, you know. But if they learn more about it, they'd probably be more willing to, you know, file, you know, and that could prevent a lot of problems in the future and stuff like that. So I feel like that's important, and that's something that needs help. Well, people need help with that.
So utilizing internet and increasing digital skill set around things that help with like economic development and filing personal financial literacy.
Cybersecurity, right? So I have a couple of elderly people that say, hey, today I got an email. I clicked it and they told me my computer been hacked and all I got to do is pay $2,000 to get it unhacked and I'll be good to go. And so I think a lot of people sometimes don't realize what a scam is on the internet and they just click the link, you know, somebody calls them and the next thing you know, they're swiping their credit card and they're taking all their money. So I think that when it comes to education and cybersecurity, don't click emails from people you don't know or links from people you don't know. Is always a good thing in practice to try. But, you know, sometimes elderly people are the victims of scams that they just may not be aware of.
So vulnerable populations.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Hold on, come here.
Yeah, I wanted to like highly agree with that, and not vulnerable populations doesn't necessarily look like what we think it does too. I have worked with people who have PhDs who get scammed around Christmas time every year because they click on something that says your package is being delivered and they put in information and then they lose a bunch of money. So vulnerable populations or populations vulnerable particularly to phishing do not look like how I think we think they look. So just always thinking about in every configuration when people let their guard down and are trusting on the internet. And also just thinking about the internet, one of the side effects, many of the side effects of being on the internet and having information, teaching, learning built around that. There's always some new threat, there's always some new vulnerability, and I think we take that for granted too, along with the internet in some senses, especially those of us who have a lot of access. And I'm imagining if people at these, again, I've worked with medical doctors who get scammed, if they're having great issues with that, I could imagine, you know, all the way down the line what that's looking like.
And also to couple YouTube's point with the increase of technology, right, with AI, and we know that a lot of people are like, my daughter called and asked for my credit card information, but she was upstairs, so that's weird, right? Or even, like you said, thinking about vulnerable populations. I think Tremaine emailed me 2 days ago, Tremaine, right, robot Tremaine, and asked me to log into this email. And I'm like, he never does that. So I called and was like, is this you? And he's like, nope, spam, block it. But because the vulnerability for me was that he was a trusted person, right? This isn't some person that's calling from a different country. This is somebody I work with. But why is he asking me to log in? We work together, right? But it's the vulnerability of even thinking, oh, maybe I should do this. Like you said, the area of vulnerability could be that trusted person. And with AI, we know that all of these technologies are utilizing vulnerable points and pressure points to get compliance and some of that. That's not like an anti-AI thing, I'm just saying. It's the newest thing. It's not.
kind of to touch on what you were both saying, especially with like just how rapidly the apps are coming out, I think there's could be a really great opportunity for a lot of intergenerational work on this and intergenerational teaching, where, I mean, we just, as a society, we just like need to allow kids to lead more spaces. And since technology is something that's just so fluid and fast for them, you know, it could be a great way to bring, because I do think like as an educator too, we are not up to date as them. Like there's so many things that they're using that we're like, oh, use this old app that I've been using for 5 years, and they're doing something that's just so much more efficient, so much faster, so much more like connected to who they are as people. And so it'd be, I think could be some really good opportunities for that.
Any pressing stories before we wrap up? All right. Well, I just want to say, as a Harrisburg resident, we do these a lot, but I'm just really excited that you guys came and were really vulnerable and honest in the conversation. We have a lot of great feedback, a lot of teachable moments, so give yourselves a round of a hand for sticking it out. I know that was a lot. And then we are going to have some closing remarks from PBDA. I don't know if y'all, at this point, like, we're out of here.
So here's, in closing, I can offer this as a representative of the authority. I hope that you all have a much better understanding of the programs that we are trying to work through, BEAD, digital equity, etc. And I hope you understand the various processes that we have to navigate to make that funding available for our communities, or available to be implemented within our communities. The authority doesn't have all the answers, which is why when you were telling your stories, we were sitting there listening. Because what we can do now is take the information you've given us and go back and look at what we're bound by from a regulatory perspective, from the regulations, what we're allowed to do, and try to have the most impact as possible. And we will continue to make ourselves available to you. So I appreciate you providing us the opportunity to come here today, providing us the opportunity to provide you with information, and you providing us with information. And I look forward to keeping those lines of communication open. And as we wrap up here, I'll give my business card out, and Kaylee will give her business card out. And if you need to, you can reach us. Okay. So that's all I've got.
So this link for replay will be available. I would just encourage you all, there is an online survey, so if you know someone who is not here today, please encourage community members to fill out the survey so that we get the maximum feedback, and this whole entire footage will be available for the next couple of days for people to be able to look at it. I'll hand it over to Dr. Campbell.
And we encourage your folks, on the YPOC Facebook page, we've put all the links that we have talked about today, the fact sheets, the website to the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority. So it'll just be in a convenient place in this event for you to share with your neighbor, share with your other folks that are in the greater Harrisburg area, so we can continue to get that feedback. Thank you guys for coming. You were an amazing, amazing, amazing group. Bye, everybody online. Thank you guys for sticking with us. We had about 10 people come through online, so thank you very much, y'all.